So as you can see now, it's come up to nearly 11 o'clock. I'm sitting on the fishing chair next to the bank, my fishing spot. Maybe the odds on I won't catch anything for the next hour or so, but there again I didn't think I was going to get a hook or a bite, and the bait being taken earlier on, so you never know really what's around the corner. Plus, well, it's just nice sitting here in the mist. I can't really see very much as the end of the rod disappears into the mist. And sort of 45 degrees from the tip onto the surface is where the float is. But it's just nice just to sit here, as I say, in anticipation. Surrounded by mist, the dark, in a perverse sort of way. This is just another sort of icing on the cake to being outdoors when you know no one else will be. So I'm all togged up nice and warm, and I'll probably sit this out for about another hour or so. Then make a brew and then probably settle for the night. Just before having my brew, sparking up the fire again. So I was fishing for about an hour. It's getting really cold, so I really need to get the fire going and warm myself up. And my sleeping bag, I normally, when I finish the sort of sleep, if it's a sort of inclement weather, damp and cold, I normally pack my sleep kit back in my holdall just to protect it. And for the reason that's actually happened to it now, the mist came across from the river and made the sleeping bag surface. Didn't get soaking, it was just on the outside surface, it was damp. So I've just hung it over the back of the chair, and I've already dried out one side, so it was only just sort of surface damp, but it hasn't taken long. It's about 10 minutes each side, so that's going to be nice and dry and warm, and then I will actually put that in my kit bag, so it keeps it in good condition for when I go to sleep in about an hour or so, when I've made myself a brew and warmed myself up. Good morning. It's now Saturday. Cold and frosty last night. Any dampness that was on the inside surface of the tarp was crispy frozen. When I went to make my drink, took the lid off the kettle and that was frozen on the top. So yeah, it really turned cold. It must have been about, I think it was about -1 last night to -2. It's nice and sunny today, but don't let that deceive you. It's a cool breeze in the background as well, so the chill factor this time of day, even though it's more sunny, is much colder than what it was this time yesterday morning. So I used my softy jacket on my legs, and that did the job last night as far as sleeping comfortably warm. So it was my NBC jacket as planned instead of my softy jacket. And then underneath the sleeping bag, you can see I draped my jacket over my legs and was able to tuck the arms just underneath the mat, so it's an extra surface. So that done the job, and I kept my softy trousers underneath my normal day trousers from when I actually did that yesterday. Okay, so I've had brunchy breakfast. Washed all my utensils, prepped and ready for the next time, tidied up, working space underneath the shelter. The wind has really been kicking up broadside coming in from the river, so what I might do later on, especially when it comes to sleep time, is lower the height of the ridge, the whole configuration down by sort of 100%, so the bottom edges are nearly touching the floor, and then I'll bring the canoe in and bring it broadside here, just lean it, support it on some sticks, so that will actually protect me from any crosswind. It's mainly sort of catching, as you can see, where it's bowing on the top of the actual or the midsection of the tarp, and that's when the bungees do come in pretty handy, is when you do get that gust of wind. You've got that little bit of give, but then of course you must make sure that the fixings are secure. So what I've actually done obviously the soft earth is really convenient to actually put the tent pegs in, but you know, they will give, because obviously if the ground's a little bit soft, firm enough to put in, but of course at this time of year when it gets a bit damp it gets a bit softer. So you can see there I've just made really crude, I've not actually made a proper tent peg, it just chamfered the end, and it's about a 12-inch bit of stick that I've knocked in at an angle just to give it that extra support, because obviously that stick is thicker than the tent peg, which can act like a cheese cutter, cheese wire cutting into the earth. And the same with this one. Stronger than just the peg itself, because of course the wire cuts into the earth and then becomes vertical, when actually the tent peg should be 45 degrees outwards from your footprint, so it keeps the solidity. But anyway, that's done the job so far. Considering this is now having a little bit of action, moving around, flexing its joints around a little bit. Phone is on the solar panel, charging in the direct sun as it goes off slowly to the west. It's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon now. So while I'm active moving around during the day, I'll leave the tarp as it is unless it actually really kicks up any worse, where it does put it at risk and I'll just have to drop it. But I think I'll probably drop it for night time and make the profile much lower, and it will also give me a little bit more of a thermal quality as well. But I'm going to procure some more wood while it's light and dry. Heavy duty gloves, 3-blade saw. I'll get the wood cutting blade out for that one. The long stem is metal, as a metal blade, wood cutting, and also another blade which is sort of like a bit universal, but it can also be used for cutting bone as well, so if you're procuring the hunt and that sort of thing. But I haven't really got much wood left under here, so that's what I've got left. I'm going to need about sort of 3-4 times that amount to keep me going. Considering how cold it was last night, it's going to be the same again tonight, so I want to make sure I've got plenty of fuel. I'm ready for later on when it gets dark and I'll do some cooking and a bit of central heating. Then once I've got my camp sorted, ready for the rest of the day, I'll have a bit of leisurely time sitting in the freezing cold wind as the sun sets, trying to see if I can catch that one that got away. Plus as well, cutting the wood and procuring it's going to warm me up, so that's going to be nice. And my knee pads, you don't want to be going to kneel down and under the leaves or any foliage that's on the ground. You get a nasty bit of twig like that. It could be anything even thicker than that that goes into the kneecap and creates discomfort. So hands and knees that are obviously in contact with the floor, and anything where you're doing heavy duty work, you want to protect them. Okay, so here's a nice long trunk with some branches stemming off, and there's a nice piece here that I'm going to cut in one piece and then drag it and then cut it into pieces back at my pitch. Okay, so I finished cutting the length and I'm going to drag this back to my pitch, all in one piece. And there's similar deadwood behind me, so I'm going to do the same technique again. So out of those 3 lengths, I've got sort of first, second and at least third stage wood with a little bit of kindling on the smaller little branches that are on the external parts of the main thicker stems. So, an all-in-one job, all good stuff. So I just walked around the branches that are on the ground and just snapped off all the small bits while they were just placed on the ground. And then what's left is the main stems, which is going to be the thicker, longer burning firewood, just stand against the tree, just so it's easier to see what's actually left. To then cut up and add to the rest of that wood, and that will be the majority of the wood that I'll need for the rest of the day and night, and maybe a little bit tomorrow morning. Normally I have my 10 litre jerry can. That's a 20 litre, but I filled up with about 16 litres, mainly because I was going to be here, well, I was going to be out for nearly 4 days, and I wanted sort of, so that meant I would have had at least 10 to 12 litres, and I wanted about 3 or 4 to put in the solar shower. When I mentioned it earlier and it was in my kit bag, It wasn't going to be a definite thing, but I thought, well, what I was thinking of doing was, if it was going to be a really warm day, not too much of a chill wind factor, but the sun was out, obviously the black doesn't reflect heat, so of course would absorb it. So what I was thinking of doing was actually filling that up with about 2 or 3 litres, well about 3 or 4 litres rather, of water, although the gravity pull on it tends to be more, at least sort of 10 to 15 litres minimum. Then you get the flow gravitationally to travel down the spout rose flex. I won't go too much in depth because there's pros and cons about these solar showers. A lot of people have started to sort of cut off the tube, but the whole idea of this tube is you don't know where you might hang that. When you're in the outdoors, you don't actually know where you're going to hang this, so it might be quite high. So if you cut the tube off and it's just above your head, you could actually be wasting a lot of water, when actually holding the tube and directing it over your body is much more efficient to rinse you off, hence saving water. And I was going to give that a bash this weekend, but leaving the bag out in front of the sun before it's set, it didn't get warm at all, so I could have filled it up with water earlier on, maybe when the sun rose, and had the sun on it all day, and as it is in my face now, setting to the west, and I don't think it would have warmed up the water, because obviously the chill factor of the air and the breeze is around about 4 degrees. Wasn't warm enough now. I'd have had a cold shower, and of course I didn't want that. Of course sometimes it's nice to have that even when it's freezing cold, but the objective was maybe to sort of experiment with it, but other things have sort of come in the way to do over this weekend, so I'll probably give it another try. Maybe a winter camp, and probably wait till spring. I've not used it outdoors camping, but I have actually used it indoors as part of a prep kit. When my hot water failed in my house, so I had to fill up kettles of hot water on the gas ring and mix it with cold water and then fill it up, and actually sat in the bath, had this hanging from one of the rafters in the ceiling, and it really did the job. I was able to actually fill it up virtually all the way to the 20 litres, and thanks to my son, yet another little outdoorsy bit of kit that he got me for a present, quite a few years, about 5-6 years ago. But yeah, I'll definitely use it. But if I have a shower in the nude, I'll obviously have to obscure certain parts of the anatomy out. Don't want to frighten anyone off my channel. Okay, so I've got my pitch. I haven't quite slung my hook yet, but I've made some really crude ground bait. I brought some cakes. They'd gone a bit stale, and that was the only thing that I could sort of find indoors, so a quick rush to get out and bring whatever I could. I brought those with me. I mixed some of that up yesterday with chopped up earthworms, and again I've done the same again today, and also mixed in some scrapings from the scrambled egg saucepan, and also there was about half a naan bread left over, so I've sort of broken that up. So I'll put that on probably in about 2 lots. I'll sling some in a moment, let that settle, and then cast my float, and then maybe put some more of this in a bit later on. And again, this is that I brought up the first time I brought out some of my fishing kit. A cork floating, you put a lanyard on it, but a cork handled floating knife. Really good if it does fall in the water. You can just pull it back and it won't sink. Very old, as I say, it's nearly as old as me. So that's nearly antique. So as I sit bankside, aircraft flying over, sitting comfy on my chair, got my thermals on, keeping them on all day. I've got all my layers on because the temperature's definitely dropping now. Nice and cosy, and what I've also done and added extra, it's got some hand warmers inside my gloves. They're little sachets, they come in pairs in an airtight sealed plastic pack. You take them out the pack, give them a good shake, and they start to warm up within about sort of a minute, and then just put them inside your glove. I've just got sort of thin gloves here. They're okay, they're warm enough. They've got like a sort of protective sort of pimple effect rubberized surface on the hand, so sort of when you grip it's got more of a practical surface. I've got some more thermal gloves that I sometimes use when I'm paddling in very cold weather. So obviously I've got one in each hand, it's sort of going across my palm, and I can just sort of close my fingers like that and it warms them up. and then you can actually put the outside of your fingers against the palm of the other glove to sort of warm the outside of your fingers up. But I mean they were in there for a couple of minutes and really made the difference. So yes, warm fingers while sitting relaxing. I might catch something, I might not, but that's my widescreen viewing for a Saturday night. I can see all the silhouettes, the sky is clear, I can see all the star constellations, I can see the moon which is to my left, just sitting at the edge of the bank, seeing all the different textures, all the silhouette, you know, the sort of sheenness of the water, slightly different colour of the sky, all different tones of grey and black. Easy to see the trees right next to me, but obviously on the other side of the bank it's just all black silhouettes, all the shapes, different sizes of different types of trees. Well, I'm just anticipating, hoping for that fish that got away. Come back into my warm hands. It's coming up to about 6:30 and I'm going to warm myself up, make myself a brew. So I've just come on my shelter, kneeling on me padded kneeling mat. Got my brew stuff ready, biscuits on the left, tea bag, sugar, and then my cup, and then some tinned evaporated milk. But I've really gone ground zero, real down to basics. Hexi stove, kneeling on the ground, everything's on the ground. And I've actually, I brought this up a few years ago when I did a wild camp in the woods and was talking about Hexi stoves. What I tend to do is I'll break a block in half. That will get the water going or whatever you want heating or cooking. Because sometimes you can put a full rectangular block, which of course is twice the size of that, and that will burn just a little bit longer than half a block. So if you break them in half, and when this first half is dying down, which it is a little bit now, I'm going to put this one on it. That's going to take, so really two halves, in a funny sort of way, defying all mathematics, last for longer than the whole block. That's what I've found in my experience anyway. And plus as well, in the colder weather, you know, it takes longer to heat. And that goes for anything really, even whatever you're cooking. There's my little EDC attachment. I haven't included this for quite a while, but it's got my little torch. People, you know who you are, have given me these little items. I got that myself. I've had that. Blinking hell, I've had this since about 2008 I think, and it's still holding strong. Little whistle, little torch. That is really powerful. Thanks Mick, Animal Tendencies, and thanks V Wild Soul. That's a petrol lighter. Just unscrew it, just really basic. Flick the flint, and yeah, so I sometimes put that on my belt as well. So I thought I'd just include that, because that is quite an old bit of school stuff that I've had for a long time. One of my favourite little bit of belt attachments actually. Oh yeah, not forgetting, I think it's American Army issue, but I got it off eBay anyway. Really strong, much better than the ones that you get in camping shops, unless it's this type of grade. But a little tin opener, and I used that this morning to open the tin of milk that I then decanted into that plastic container. But now you can see there's still a bit of life left in that block, and she's boiling with still a bit of flame left. Now if I'd have put that whole block on there all at once and lit it, it probably, odds on, wouldn't have actually got to that boiling point yet. The reason why I decided to use the Hexi stove is that with the cold weather there is enough fuel, or I did anticipate having enough fuel for the 533 stove, but because of the cold weather I think it's been using more fuel. Obviously it takes longer to heat up, that sort of thing, and I think it will see me through till tomorrow morning, but I don't want to be caught short. So I thought, while I've got the free time, I'll get the Hexi go. Hexi? Yeah, easy for me to say. Get the Hexi going. As you know, I've got that for backup. But I thought it would be nice just to have a little bit of crude flame sitting on the floor and just making a brew, and then I'll take that over back to my fishing spot and just sort of chill by the riverbank, see if the old fluorescent float makes a bobbin, and just sup my tea, and that'll be my widescreen viewing for the evening until I eventually get the campfire going. So I return to the bank with a nice hot sweet cup of tea, really going down well, warming the cockles of my heart. Dunked a couple of biscuits, placed on the table attachment to the chair, which is really convenient, and then just continuing just to literally chill out in the chilly breeze, anticipating a bite. You know, people sort of think, well, you know, why sit out in the cold? Odds on maybe not catching a fish. But I think it's just something primal, really. Why, you know, we sort of go outdoors, have the campfires, cook on an open campfire, and just, so some people will just sit in front of the campfire and just stare at it, talking with a group of friends, all appreciating the same thing. But all you're actually doing is sitting outside in the cold in front of a fire. But I think it brings out something primal in people, something that's lost in modern society. But for those of you that don't mind going outdoors and roughing it, appreciate and understand where I'm coming from, really. So I've got another few hours of this. A few years back I got a comment or an inquiry saying, well, what do you find to do when it gets dark? And it's like, well, that's part of it. Being outdoors is, it's not just about the sunny weather coming out, and yeah, it's great, you know, if that encourages people to get out. People need to do that sort of thing nowadays, especially. But it's just, you know, enjoying all the seasons. It's you know, some people are just not maybe up for it. I've known people that love the city, love urban life, you know, can't stand the countryside. Well, if that's their bag, then, you know, if that's what they're into. But I think if you can live in your own space, live in your own head, and don't mind being on your own, or being alone, there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. And if you like the solitude, and you like sort of just being out in nature, as I do, and just sharing my experiences, you know, with a few, they're never sort of tutorial videos as such, but hopefully people can learn from them, or just get ideas and think, yeah, I want to do that, or I'll try doing it that way. But anyway, enough of my waffling, and the next thing you'll see me doing is getting the fire pit going and cooking something different to eat from last night. It's just gone 9 o'clock, so I've got the fire going now with the saucepan, and that's got some water in it to boil up. And what I'm going to have is virtually the same as I had last time I was here last week, when I had the tin beef slices already cooked in gravy. But this time I'm going to fry up an onion. Well, actually no, I might actually cut it up and add it with the carrots, broccoli and potatoes, but I've actually washed them, but I've actually now got to cut them. Well, a carrot, some new potatoes and broccoli, pre-washed at home, and put them just sort of in a bit of a seal bag. It's not vacuum packed like the last one, it's just a store and seal. And going to knock up those vegetables and just make a sort of stewy casserole with it. Season it and thicken it and tomato it up with the old tomato sauce, and then a stock cube chicken and vegetable stock cube also to season it up and just make it a bit more flavoursome. I had initially planned to make a bit of a project with a fire reflector, making it much wider, and then maybe sort of bringing it off at an angle. You don't want to close in the two sides because you might need access to actually work the fire. So what I was going to do was actually make a little project. I think I'll make it for another time when I've got more time, rather than just having the crude reflector, but that has really been working. But for sort of longer term and even more efficiency, which would probably raise the temperature by about another maybe 2 to 3 degrees, projecting the way that you're facing it when you're sitting to get the warmth, is by taking it wide and then just taking some angles off, and it would enclose the heat to come more this way. Obviously it can expand out a little bit, but the initial reflection from here will actually push the therms over, so you actually do get the heat, but obviously not as efficient as if it came out wider. So that's all the vegetables: carrots, potatoes, broccoli, onion, and I've got sugar snap peas. So I'm going to boil those in the saucepan and then eventually add the tinned beef and the seasoning. Virtually identical to last week's beef casserole that I made. Compared to the last time when I was boiling up the vegetables, to save time, I actually wait till the flames died down of sort of burning bits of wood. The flames were still sort of engulfing round the pot to cook, but in this situation what I've done is I've waited for the wood to burn down large bits into sort of nice selection of coals, then sort of made it up into a sort of a small dome, then flattened it, so I've got all the heat at an angle coming up, and of course the heat that's underneath is just like a hot plate. Believe it or not, that is glowing hot, and you can see it's boiling the veg. So two different ways of doing it: sort of on the flames, providing they don't engulf over the lid, and of course dangerous to when you want to take the lid off and what have you, especially if you haven't got a hook to sort of take it off, or a sort of a lever to go underneath the little lid lifter. But say that's just another how I normally tend to like to cook on the coals. Once you actually get used to knowing how much you need for whatever you're cooking, and of course that's a prime example of what's appropriate to actually make this beefy casserole. The vegetables are raw. They'll take about 20 minutes to cook through. Then I'll add the tinned meat and the seasoning, and then I'll keep it going for about another 20 minutes, so it really brings out the flavours and makes it a little bit more of a rich taste to it. And behind me there's a gentle breeze. I hope it doesn't kick up like it was earlier on. I think it won't be any worse than what it is now, but you can see it rippling the water, the reflection of the moon, which is a nice sort of orangey yellow. Believe me, you don't get better than something like this on a -2 wind chill factor Saturday night to warm up the body internally and also externally with a fire. I'll get halfway through my casserole and then I'll put some bigger logs on that, and that'll be well flaring up to give me some heat, and then sit a little bit nearer to it. It's a bright and breezy Sunday morning, and as you can see I lowered the configuration of my tarp, but more about the whys and wherefores of that. So as you can see, as the wind blows on the right hand side, the height of it is just enough to sort of miss that bit of breeze, and plus as well I can sort of crouch down and still walk sort of without getting my hands and knees. Plus, placing the chair in the middle, just underneath the ridge line, I've got enough headspace to actually sit still under the shelter, nice and comfortably on the chair, and access the cook and stuff whatever else I need. I could have taken the broadside edges right down to ground level, but of course then that would have made it in hands and knees crawling. And it hasn't been gale force winds to actually warrant me to lower it right down to ground level. So of course this side, broadside against the crosswinds coming from the river, is the canoe angled, but you'll notice the highest edge all the way along is higher than the edge of the tarp. If I'd have had the tarp sort of a little bit higher, I could have draped it over, but it would have been just a lot of faffing around. So I braced it on 2 pieces of wood, one there and one just down there. So if you imagine my hand is the breeze, it's coming over to the edge, but then missing the edge of the tarp, which could bellows it up. I'm only actually getting pressure on the wind actually going down, so of course it's coming across, then over the top of the tarp, without actually getting underneath it, hence that's why I had this higher than the actual edge of the tarp. I was going to bring this end sort of further across, blocking off my head end, but it would have meant the canoe would have been at a slight angle, so I would have actually cut off all the crosswinds, but then it would have left a vulnerable point down the end where wind could have sort of like turned at the end of the canoe if it had been out at an angle instead of parallel to the edge, and maybe caught the underneath there. But what I did, I just blocked the head end with my folding chair, so it was actually underneath, protected under the shelter if there was any rain, although it wasn't predicted, and that did a job. Got it out of the way, was under the tarp, and also just blocked a little bit of breeze, cool effect, on my head end. So it all worked. I had really good warmth at the end of the night before I settled, and I was sitting about just about there, and I could even sort of hold my ungloved hands out in front of the fire. I could feel the warmth, so that was really good. I really did notice, standing out here before I settled about 2 o'clock in the morning, standing where I am now, the breeze sort of blowing as it is, as you can see, then going actually underneath. It was like an engine being switched off, and there was peace and quiet. Although there's a bit of rustling of the tarp itself, you know, to the wind, but there was no breeze coming across, because that really did a good job. So all good stuff. So as you can see, I'm seated comfortably under the tarp. The wind is around me but not on me, and I'm all ready now to make breakfast. Got everything to hand, food bag, stove ready to go. So I've got a boil in the bag, all day breakfast, which obviously I'll put in the saucepan, which is heating up on the 533. Sort of boils up for 8-10 minutes. You don't know what sort of residue is going to come off the packet into the water. Hence, I'm not going to use the water to heat up the breakfast as my brew water. So I'm boiling that up separately on the Hexie stove. Alright, a one-off, but probably won't do you any harm. If I've got the Hexie, that can boil up the water at the same time that the breakfast is doing. So there we go, rinsing out my drinking mug with the water that boiled the all-day breakfast. So I think point made. Don't really want to be drinking that. It looks like a brew already. I haven't even put anything in it. And that was after I rinsed out the residue out of the mug a couple of times, which then made it reasonably clean, and then a final rinse just to see the colour of the water, and voila. So I didn't want to be making a flavoursome brew with the water that had heated up my bag of food. So before I bag up my faithful Coleman stove, there was a little bit of fuel left. I reckon I could have got another couple of brews out of it. But what I always do is I release the fuel filler cap very gently to release any air pressure that's left over, which obviously is primed from the pump to create the gaseous effect for then the fumes to ignite, basically for the stove to work. But I always release that when I'm taking it in transit. So if for any reason this switch lever got snagged and opened, there'd be no petrol fumes coming out. So I can sort of do that, open it all the way, and there's nothing. So it's sort of like safe and best practice to do that. Also, what I like to do before I put some of my cookware away into just sort of a disposable bag before I actually put it in my kit bag is to get a clump of grass and just brush out any sort of burning residue, or should I say burnt residue, that's obviously underneath the saucepan, and as in this case the Hexie stove. But you can see there's sort of some black greasy effects where I sort of folded it and then push that in. So I'll just give it a final wipe over and then pack those away. Scouring pad. And as always, LNT. leave it as I found it. So it's coming up to 4:30 in the afternoon, sort of about a half moon. Sky's reasonably clear, there's a fresh chill to it. Canoe's ready, loaded, ready to leave. Lightweight gloves just to protect my hands when I'm paddling. These are the same as the black ones, but the black ones I use because these can get a little bit grubby from the wet and what have you, and handling the wet paddle if there's any drips. So it's just nice to have. They're lightweight, the black pair, just for sort of around admin around the camp. And then of course these when I paddle. And I've got my head torch ready to put on, and also my TC12, because by the time I get back to moor up where I put in, it's going to start to get a little bit dusky dark, so safe to have the lights ready, and no doubt I'm going to come across some fishermen either near to where I put in and where I'm actually going to eventually get out. But I can feel that cool air, that chill factor, which is going to get down to 0 at least. Maybe before I get back anyway, but it's gradually reducing the temperature. So I'm going to don my old skull cap, which has kept my head cosy warm all this weekend. So it's nice to have a little bit of leisurely fishing, although I didn't catch anything except for the one that got away. I'm sure it was a perch, probably about sort of, I don't know, 8-9 inches long, where I saw it sort of splash about, and it was only Murphy's Law that I actually sort of left my chair where the rod was and just went to get sort of a snack, and was thinking about maybe making a brew, because I only put the float in for like half an hour and was waiting for the bait to take. And of course Murphy's Law would have it. That's when something went for the bait, but I don't think it quite got on the hook. It must have got on the dangly part, the hanging part of the worm, and actually kept a grip. That's what made me think it was a perch, because I saw it bob a couple of times. But yesterday and the day before, Friday and Saturday, I was getting a little bit of a bobbing of the float a couple of times, but it was nothing to sort of write home about. But considering the location that I'm at is not that sort of conducive for really good fishing, because there's a lot of overhang of the trees. A couple of times I got the float snagged in one of the overhangs of the branches, trying to sort of get a little bit further out into maybe the centre of the river. But of course it's not happening when you've got a location like where I am here. You really are limited to the approach to how you're going to fish. But I'm quite sure near where I've been fishing, underneath that fallen, well, virtually looks like a tree really. I bet there's a few perch lurking around under there. But the thing is, I could have cast out there, but every time you could get snagged anywhere, because obviously I don't know what's underneath. There goes a pheasant. Maybe lunch next time. But I enjoyed it, but incorporating it with a camp out. But hopefully next time I'll be a bit more strategic. I'm sure I'd be able to catch something maybe early morning, especially perch when their feeding time is sort of just at the break of day as sun rises, and maybe for a couple of hours. So I'll have to get up a little bit earlier next time rather than have a lazy lie-in, because I've been sitting around a campfire and that being my widescreen entertainment till about 2 o'clock in the morning. Keeping warm around the campfire. A final note, you know, it's sort of camping out in sub-zero temperatures. It's not to be taken lightly. I mean, my approach to it is not being all gung-ho, oh, everyone go outdoors and, you know, it doesn't matter what weather it is. You've got to be considerate to the changing of the weather where you are, you know, especially on the rivers. I mean, you can imagine if I, let's say there's an accident and somehow I fell in the water, it's being actually used to the freezing cold temperature. I'll talk about that another time, but I did early November last year, actually practiced scuppering out of my canoe, wearing all my clothes and getting back on board the canoe using the tug ropes and that sort of thing, and the specific technique you use when you actually board back onto a canoe if you've sort of fallen overboard. And the shock factor, the RNLI have got a safety video out about, you know, what to expect if you fell in the cold water. It's the shock to the body, the muscles tense, you catch your breath and then your breathing actually tenses, and then after a while that's actually the thing that can actually catch you out rather than being able to swim out of cold water. So it's actually preparing, being aware of what to expect from maybe putting yourself through that sort of practice experience, and even sort of coming outdoors, camping outdoors when the weather's very cold. I enjoy that. I enjoy the challenge, but it's, you know, it's not to be taken lightly. It is a serious subject, because if you get something wrong, you've only got to get hypothermia or sort of get lost on your tracks and not make your way back, then you know, you could be in for some problems, especially when it's cold weather. So that really is a safety note, really, just in case anyone's sort of thinking, oh, it's okay to sort of go out whenever you want, but the safety factors are really important to consider. So I've had a good few days, 3 nights, big 3 nights out, paddling here in the dark, and it looks as if by the time I get halfway back, I'll be in the dark on the way home as well. When I do my wild camping and outdoor activities, each time there can be a number of activities that could be similar, but if I think they're a little bit varied, I'll include them in the video. Another little project I would like to do, I've done it before but maybe not incorporated it in one of my outdoors activity videos, is fire reflector. I've done a variety of improvised fire reflectors to keep the heat in, etc. And there is a video which I uploaded I think about 2 years ago, I think it was 2015, an amalgamation of some fire reflectors that I'd made in different outings, different wild camps, and then pieced them all together into one video. But you normally find a sort of artisan, real sort of classy, crafty bushcraft fire reflector. They're normally made with bits of wood that are very symmetrical. They're procured maybe from live trees where someone's got permission to sort of cut them down. But when you consider the short time that I had to procure bits of wood that were similar in shape, just to make at least a real sort of crude reflector, but it did the job. I could have spent maybe half a day getting really bits of symmetrical wood that are all equal in length, thickness, and actually then have the reflector vertical with 2 uprights either side and then just slot in the logs of wood in, so then it's more of a reflector in a vertical position. Which leaves me to say, as always, thanks for watching, really appreciate your interest, and once again I hope you got some interest and deemed some ideas from my outing over the past 3 nights, and I'll catch you in another video soon. Cheers, take care.